Okay, good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future of smart buildings. We're a group of people, our panelists, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org. We've been going for 2, maybe 3 years now. So it's been an interesting journey. And just a reminder that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. So just keep that in mind. And please do post questions, comments, and chat, especially today, because we want as much interaction and feedback from the audience as possible on the Zoom chat. So let's make that interactive. And this slide deck is available on mondaylive.org if you want any of the information on it. So this being October, we have been discussing the industry metamorphosis. I'm still not getting that word right, but never mind. What's wrong with that?
That was pretty good.
Yeah, that seemed good.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up.
Made my day. So our agenda today, news and trends, normal chit chat, and then getting back to the theme of the month. And really what we want to do today is really, having spent the last few weeks talking about all the changes that we'll recount in a minute, we really want to be sort of looking to the future and try and get ourselves, this group here, and as well as the audience, to make some predictions, make some, some thoughts, share some thoughts about where we think the industry is going. So hopefully that's going to be interesting. But before we get to that, I hand it over to Mr. Ken Sinclair.
Thanks, Santo. We're hard at getting our program together for Chicago. It's coming together well. We now have our agenda online. We've got titles and brief descriptions of all of our sessions, and we're now confirming speakers. We've had preliminary discussions, but now we're getting down to, can you come at this time? And can you send us a headshot and that, whoops, there goes, okay. We're constantly updating, so keep checking back. Probably if you look at it, the next time you look at it, I'm sure a few people have been added. I think we're doing a good job of addressing the metamorphosis, ever what that word is. There's a lot of change going on, and it's definitely being reflected in the folks coming to speak. We sort of thought what we knew some of these sessions would be about, and once we start talking to the folks, they kind of get morphed a little bit into what is in their head right at the moment. So yeah, good changes, positive stuff, looking forward to it. We're also, because it's our 25th anniversary, we're having a special event on 11 o'clock on Monday that runs right through, and we're going to feed the folks that come out, give them some lunch and stuff to celebrate our 25th anniversary, and we'll give you a little chit chat as to where we see automated buildings going in the future at that session. So we'd invite anybody who's listening to come on out to that. We've got some films we're actually videos that we're actually producing to try and help support our sessions and also our anniversary event. So keep your eye open for those. That leads into the thing on the bottom corner here, the first 20 years of our 25th anniversary. I grabbed a program, and before we went online, we were talking about media being the message. And this is a program called Loom, and what it does is it just captures your screen while you talk, and you can kind of very quickly carry on your own Zoom meeting and be in total control of it, which is kind of fun. Anyway, you can see how we've used that to create a blur of the last 20 years of our magazine. And we've also, I just did another post showing what we've been doing with some of our Pinterest stuff. We've got about 3,000 connections there of articles that we've had over the last 7 years. So anyway, we're just trying to kind of document our history and kind of give a little bit of a deeper view as to what automated buildings is. Back to you.
Thank you again. Thanks. So for my slide, this is kind of three somewhat disconnected pieces that I came across in the last week, but there's a flow to it. The left one here is Buffett and Charlie Munger, who works for him. Is kind of the Warren Buffett's right-hand man, I think. It's the way to do it. They're now they've been talking about the Office Armageddon, which I thought was sort of a bit of a signal that Office Armageddon and the issues that we've been talking about is getting into real sort of mainstream spaces. So I thought that's very interesting. And Munger specifically saying that it's not just the building owners and the banks, but also beyond that, the impact is going to be quite significant. And it's that's kind of one side of that. The one in the middle here is another sort of interesting trend that I've been seeing the last few weeks. Sort of city planners and sort of big developers, big sort of strategic bodies, policy bodies almost, are sort of rethinking the structure of cities. And this specific one is a video, an interesting video about how Australia is building in Melbourne, building a very complex new railway system in Melbourne. And the point here is that most subway and metro systems in cities have been radial in terms of their construction. It's been designed to bring people from the suburbs to downtown and back to suburbs. And as we know, one of the things that's changing is that that's not happening. People are working wherever they want. They need to work wherever they want, right? So that whole structure of how railways and public transit has been constructed has been wrong. So this is a sort of a reversal of that. And they're spending a huge amount of money sort of connecting suburban cities effectively. It's going to take, obviously decades. These things are not quick. So I thought that was, again, as part of the trend. And just for fun, the third one on the right is kind of very futuristic article about us starting to build basically cities in space. What does that look like? I've never really sort of thought about cities in space. Obviously, cities on Earth is buildings and things close together, but in space you really can't do that because they kind of bump into each other going at 17,000 miles an hour. So cities in space is really about the orbit, the angle of the orbit. And if the angle of the orbits are similar to each other, then they're effectively a city because they're sort of close to each other, and they can share resources, they can share liftoff sort of trajectories and things like that. Obviously, 100 years ago, people were thinking about where to build cities, and they would build it next to rivers and next to the sea and next to other sort of resources. This is kind of the same, except that it's in space. So I just thought I'd share that. It's got nothing to do with directly with smart building technology that we're doing, but the changes are pretty dramatic if you start to open your eyes into sort of the broader sort of landscape of what's going on in the universe. So that's my perspective, just to open our minds up.
Hey, so Anto, on this, I know Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, they talk about how they love recessions and downturns and problems stuff, because that's when they go in and like really clean up. So they're probably going like this, like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you read that piece, it talks about that. It talks about exactly that. Yeah.
I do believe the famous quote from Warren is, "When others get greedy, I get scared. And when
Yeah.
others get scared, I get greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Scott just emulated
Matt
that.
just picked up on that.
So, what everything that we've talked about sort of fits into this sort of trend. That's, I think, is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what problem they're solving for the in-space community, but we'll leave that one aside.
Well, it's the current ISS is in an orbit of 51 degrees, and that's actually the worst orbit you can put something like an ISS, because it's expensive to get there and it's expensive to keep it up there, right? So the orbit really needs to be lower, more closer to the equator, because it's more direct to a path. So it's all about that. It costs, it costs something like 50% more in fuel just to get to 51 degrees than if it was in sort of 10, 20.
Well, when they solve the problem of gravity in the next few years, that will no longer be an issue. So
Where's
just
my
hang in
other
there.
car?
That's right.
Yeah, space elevator. All right, let's move on. Rick.
Yeah, just repeat of the things we've said before. The Smarter Summit's coming up, and we're going to start being more specific about the agenda and the schedule, and the of course the cocktail hour. And then we're going to be looking for sponsorships for some of that. And then on November 2nd, we've got the next office hour coming up, and you've got the link there to sign up. And that's the main thing about what's going on with the coalition.
Great, thank you. And our normal link, sort of links. Any other thoughts before we dive into our forecasting?
Yeah, I just posted an interesting report I got this morning from McKinsey, and their trends talking about future thoughts, and their emerging trends in facility management sourcing, which I thought was interesting. There's some really interesting. They've got a six-point vision doc. Nothing that's sort of like we haven't talked about is earth-shattering, but it's kind of interesting to see someone else coming to the similar conclusions that we've been talking about. Including my favorite, of course, Internet of Things evolution, and how that's going to go forward, and augmented reality and some stuff. So it's an interesting read. If you get a chance, this was posted in the link in the chat.
Thank you.
And they valued it at $1.9 trillion by 2024, next year. Oh, good.
This
So-
looks terrible for your company, for sure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Over the weekend, I was up at Cornell visiting my fraternity and meeting with our new class of undergrads who come in. And a number of them are in the environmental sciences as a their topic of study. And when I discussed with them what I do, it became clear that environmental studies has no concept of any relationship to buildings and controlling energy in buildings, which I thought was interesting for me to observe. I don't know if that's just unique to Cornell, but from a educating the next class coming up, the next group of the next generation rather, there's an opportunity or missed opportunity there for us, not for us, in trying to get the the generation involved in what we do, because that's where they have a good opportunity to hear about how what is it, 25 or 30% of the total energy is spent in buildings today, something like that. And there's no awareness of that basic fact and what's possible in our space to affect that. So I don't know if any of you guys have any other colleges or that you've seen that are similar to this, but I thought it was given Cornell and its reputation, the fact that they have seemingly no awareness of our world, that stuck out for me.
Yeah.
When they talk about environmental science, is it not the built environment? It's an external environment only?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
interesting.
so Steve, we're all here inside this bubble or cocoon or whatever, and all we
Right.
think about is that. And so we're not at all in tune with nobody. It never crosses anybody else's mind, man. The industry has had a marketing problem for as long as I've been around, not that long, but it's definitely had an external kind of marketing shortcoming or something. It's got a problem for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, we at times we talk about, whether it's on Mondays or Wednesdays, we talk about what we could do to better market our industry. And I think we all appreciate that in the world of education, because, for a while there, we had Melissa actively engaged with us. There's a lot of potential, guys, for us to impact our industry through better marketing. We've said that over and over again, and as evidenced by so many other things in our culture, our society right now, a lot of it begins in these college programs, as well as the other kind of educational opportunities that the next generation has, community colleges, things of that sort. Right.
100%. In fact, that's part of my prediction when we get to that stuff. That's good call,
Yep.
Steve.
Yep.
Cool. Great. If there's nothing else, let's move on to Industry Metamorphosis. And the last few weeks, this has been our journey for the last 6 weeks, in fact. In September, we talked about changing landscape. First, we talked about the changing, the fact that the business of the indoor environment, the real estate business effectively is dramatically changing. If we recall that. And then we talked about how experience expectations are changing, both in terms of the sort of occupants of buildings, people just walk into buildings and do whatever it is they do, as well as the experience in the industry. Right? So we spent quite a bit of time talking about that. And this is really where the whole sort of concept of Jake, the engineer, came up, that sort of led to that nice article by Brian Collins. Then we talked about how technology is changing the route to market. If you recall the table of all of the different players' route to market. And then we start the metamorphosis discussion in October, where we basically got on for an hour, basically saying, yeah, everything's changing. Everything seems to be changing around what we do. And then we talked about cloud native and edge, and how that can be a way forward, a smarter way forward, because there's a lot of potential there. And last week, great presentation from Roger, we talked about how the channel is evolving, which is sort of clearly seen in the UK through what Roger presented. But clearly that's sort of is happening not just in the UK, but elsewhere. So what is next? This is all change. And I know Ken likes this quote, that we can either sort of sit by and watch it, all of that change, or we can take some charge and either drive change or at least try and predict it. So that's kind of where I want to leave it from a slide perspective, and hand it over to the panel for discussion. So who wants to start to share their thoughts about how all of this is going to change?
Go ahead, Bill.
Let me start, Tracy, just because mine has directly something to do with what Steve just talked about. And then we'll get into probably what you guys talk about is more technical. All right. So Tracy, if you don't mind, I'll just take a pass at this. And I'll start by saying every day, 10,000, every day until 2031, 10,000 baby boomers are going to retire. Every day. And there's 500,000 jobs a year in clean tech to fill. So my prediction is, well, it's not as dire as when we were trying to educate people who are working on farms to be good factory workers. But there is a sea change, a generational shift going on, where we're going to have to educate young people. And I'm not necessarily, Steve, talking about your collegiate folks. I'm talking about society in general, where at the grassroots level, let's see, how would I say it differently? Remember back in the day, we used to all take a shop class or a home ec class. We'd learn how to turn a little thing and make a little napkin holder or something. There's got to be a generational kind of shift, multi-generational shift, to fill in the gaps for not only the new jobs that are coming, but for the gaps that are happening with people retiring and the new technology. And that's cybersecurity for Fred Gordy. I see Fred out there. I mean, all kinds of stuff like that. So I say there's going to have to be a new shift in how we train, discover, work with people in the clean tech industry. That's my prediction. It's going to be a major shift there. It can't keep doing it the same way. And lest you think, Anto, lest you think that if you go back to that Mahatma Gandhi thing, we're either going to like affect change or predict change. Predicting change like a fart in the wind. I'm going to be involved in affecting change. I'm making that right now. All right, so there's mine.
Okay. Great. I'm not sure what is going to argue with that.
Yeah. I don't know that what I was thinking is so much predicting the future, but an observation that we've had lately around our team, and that is the amount of changes going on right now is increasing. And maybe even a better way to talk about it is not so much a change as much as an innovation or an evolution. Everything around us seems to be moving forward in a slightly different direction than it did previously. And we're seeing, more technologies come out, more innovations surrounding how to make buildings more energy efficient. There are so many things that have been brought to our attention, people looking for us to, help them distribute or sell or whatever it might be. We can't even keep up with it. So what that tells me, the rate of change is accelerating, which ultimately I think will drive real change. There's always some level of innovation going on, but right now I'm seeing a higher volume and an acceleration of that into areas that we haven't seen before. So, we always joke on here about some of the things that I'm saying I said 20 years ago, and they're still exactly valid, right? I could say the exact same words and they're still valid in our industry. I don't think that's going to be the case going forward with a lot of that stuff. I've missed predicting change over the years dramatically, but there's something different feeling going on right now in our industry. And I think that we're going to actually see some of this real change that we've been looking for a long time.
But when things increase like that and sort of exponential, you didn't use that word, but I think that's what you mean.
Yep.
At some point, that line becomes vertical, which means that it changes sort of hour to hour, which obviously makes no sense in an industry perspective.
Yeah, and that there's positive and negative consequences to that.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a building owner, if you're in our industry, any kind of a stakeholder, when do you drive a stake in the ground and say, okay, this is the generation I'm settling on? It's a little like, I know some people go through anxiety with when to upgrade their phone, right? If I get a new phone now, there's just going to be a new one this fall. They're going to announce a new one this fall, so I'll wait. And then, I'm going to wait until it's, easier to get my hands on it, or the technology is a little bit more mature, and then they go into the same cycle next year, right? So if we're not careful, we can generate this continuous waiting cycle to jump into this, right? It's too risky, too scary kind of thing for stakeholders, I think. But the positive is all the things that are coming out of these new innovations and so forth are really good things, right? So
Yeah, and the other thing I would argue is that with phones, you were comparing it with phones again. They've made it easy to move to change phones, right? So changing phones is not such a big deal anymore. Maybe it
Good
was
point.
5-10 years ago, but today it doesn't matter which flavor you use. They've made it significantly easier. So maybe that's the thing that you're driving towards.
Yeah, I mean, the level of standardization and cross compatibility is significant in that side of the industry, right? And it's really, you know, as I still marvel at the technology that goes into a modern day phone, given where we were, you know, when I first started my career, for instance. It's just amazing, the compute power, the capability. If you would have told me back then, you know, TV in your pocket kind of thing, no one could imagine that. So when I say it's getting commoditized, I don't mean that in the negative way, right? It's getting commoditized in terms of the user experience, but the amount of innovation going into this, you know, it just amazes me how far we've come. And the thing is, you know, everyone I talked to said, well, there's not a lot new on this year's version of the phone, right? Whatever that might be. But when you add them all together and go back 5 years even, it's significant. And that's the part that I think that we're kind of missing here a little bit in our industry. Yeah.
Of course, a lot of that, Tracy, is it's a platform to allow other people to add the things as well. You know, when you're saying the TV in the back pocket and all the other stuff, it's just the product itself. It's all the infrastructure and everything around it, and all the apps and everything. You know, everybody building on that platform.
So that is, and I think the key concept to that is the scalability of all that, right? That makes it much more scalable and open to innovation, which we don't have a platform like that. A few weeks ago, we were talking about, you know, if Apple made a component or made a product in the building space, it might look a lot like the IBB, right? And the IBB at its core is exactly what we're talking about. It's an engine for scalability, because it standardizes things and gives people a place to integrate, put their platforms that is compatible with everything else going on the platform.
And innovation.
Yep.
The comment I'd like to make is that change is built upon change. And what we're seeing now is, in this period of rapid change, the communication of changes is extremely important, and that we share our ideas, because often what we're doing can be totally eclipsed by a new technology or a new way of doing it. And when I hear about this, it's like, oh my God, I can't do what I was going to do. I've got to put my change on that change. And we're starting to see people are more comfortable with doing that. No one wants to go on their own. They want to build on something, basically going back the Uber model that built on Google Maps, that kind of a concept. We're seeing more and more of that, and we're starting to see more mediums and stuff that actually are like hamburger helpers to other existing mediums, and they just do what it did better.
You know, you just reminded me of a point in time in my career that is a parallel to the place where we are right now in our industry. When I was younger, I was in the aerospace and defense industry. And it was a big joke that the processors that we were putting into the latest and greatest airframes, planes, were generations old compared to what I could go down and buy at the local Best Buy, right? And the reason is the technology moves so quickly at producing the next generation. On that side of things, it outpaces the ability to design and validate and test and you know, a new airplane, right, to get it out there. That's a years-long process, even though it's gotten much faster. these days. So we're in that same situation with buildings where the technology has the ability to tremendously outpace our ability to even build a new big commercial building, let's say like a stadium or something like that. By the time on those projects, when it first started, by the time the airframe was done, we were again 2 or 3 generations further in processor technology. It's back when I worked for Intel, for instance. And I think we might have a little of that going on here in our space. And the problem is, how do you now take all this innovation and get it aligned with building construction and the pace at which that construction market moves, right?
Because the fundamental of it takes years to build a building, and once it's built, it's going to stay there for decades. That doesn't actually change. There's no exponential curve there.
Yeah, there's
so
semiconductor fabs going in Phoenix right now, and the most modern kind of manufacturing facility imaginable in those cases. But at the same time, I've seen the same 30 cranes at all of the different sites for the last 3 years, right? Think of what has happened in the last 3 years from a technology standpoint.
Tracy, I would argue that our industry is a laggard industry, has always been a laggard industry, and will continue to be a laggard industry. And similarly, for what you were just describing on the aircraft side, the life of a jet aircraft is similar to that. Not the same as a building, right? But it's 20 to 30 years, right? Expected life. So the majority of the thinking is around maintenance. You don't rebuild the aircraft, you run it and maintain it, and then you retire it. To the best of my knowledge. And so I don't think our industry is going to change its stripes. I think it's going to continue to be a laggard industry. But at the same time, I have my prediction for what I do think is going to happen. So, which is
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of what I believe is coming is this shift to applications being easily deployed in facilities across all the different verticals. And in other words, we're going to, being a laggard, it's taken us a while, but we're going to get to the day where the applications you need to run your building can all be accessed and downloaded into your smartphone or your tablet, and you can do whatever it is you need to do in the same manner that we process our consumer world, as well as our business world, our day-to-day business world on our phones. It's coming, but it's just because we're laggard. It just takes more time, and it's going to require things like the IBB to pull it off. But that's my future prediction as we're going to end up in the next 5 to 10 years.
And so do we remain laggards, or do we leapfrog it as part of the process of doing that?
Can I tag in there? Because I totally am betting on the leapfrogging. And I would leave the analogy to, tribes in Africa didn't have phones, and there was no way copper lines were going to be spread all over Africa. But when they were able to leapfrog that version of technology and go straight to cellular, I think there's a similar opportunity on the building operations side of things. And since everybody was talking at the beginning, I had time to refine these slides. So I actually look like I have something planned here to talk about.
Go for it.
So I spoke at this Innovate Chicago event on Friday. And I wanted to talk to people about, first of all, it was all architects. It was all the technology people in architecture firms. And I asked, how many of your firms signed up for the 2030 challenge back in 2008, 2009, to have net zero buildings by 2030? And pretty much all of them raised their hand. And then I said, okay, raise your hand if you've done an all electric building or net zero building. And 3 out of maybe 70 people raised their hand.
Actually,
maybe
I'm
60.
actually quite impressed with 3, but yeah.
Yeah, they were projects in other countries, probably. So what I wanted to talk about there was, we keep talking about the same things and we're stuck in the same loop of innovation. And really, the thing we need to be aware of is how different the physical asset world, which I consider all of us a part of, with designers, contractors, constructors, service providers, everybody focused on the physical asset. That's one world. Everyone, these are huge generalizations. Of course, there are exceptions with, universities or single owner occupants. So there are undoubtedly exceptions. But then there's a whole mess of buildings that are owned by investment funds and trusts and sovereign wealth funds and investment funds that are the asset holders world. And they don't frankly care too much about the physical asset typically. And so the 3 things I'd like to share as predictions. The first is that the industry is currently challenged by misaligned incentives. A construction manager who has the choice between buying a 95% efficient air handling unit for $400,000 or a 65% efficient one for $250,000 will buy the $250,000 one because their bonus is based upon getting the project on budget and on time. The other thing is that a lot of owners only focus on net operating income. How does this help NOI? And I feel like the control side of the industry and smart buildings folks have not done a good enough job of having the metrics and case studies to show how these newer best practices are improving the net operating income and the bottom line of the organization. And the third thing is the SEC reporting and disclosure requirements, which we've talked about on past calls, are coming, and people are going to have to take notice. So with that in mind, the first prediction here is that there'll be a greater need to invest in long-term building performance, and you're going to need to support more assets with leaner teams and better technologies, which result in a higher return. The second point is that the industry lacks data standardization. And on the pro forma and financial modeling side, everybody still uses Excel, and no one trusts any other organization's Excel model. Same thing in design and construction. The construction team doesn't trust the design team's model, and vice versa. So both teams create their own models. And then when you're going through disposition and acquisition and selling and buying an asset, frequently, like the owner of the building will provide the leases and Argus model or financial model, but the broker themselves will create their own financial model from the same leases because they don't trust the owner's model. So it's pretty interesting how it all works. So prediction 2, standardized asset financial profiles and leveraging BIM 19650 and other things around the physical asset data will increase data portability across the industry. Point number 3, building engineering is losing folks fast and there's no pipeline to fill it up. People aren't going to university for this. If they're majoring in electrical engineering or mechanical engineering, they're usually going into more profitable fields. The average age of ASHRAE members is very high, and trade schools are missing people coming in. So what does this mean? Building controls will need to allow for remote monitoring and troubleshooting, which is something we talk about all the time. But the other side of it is small teams will have to support many more assets, which means a much more portfolio style approach. And it could be a services company that supports multiple assets for multiple different owners, or it could be an organization supporting multiple assets themselves. So we have the asset holders world, we have the physical asset world. I'm not good with PowerPoint animation, so This is them combined. We really need to think of both of them together and think of it as a converged world going forward. And I was able to do that. And really, we need to really focus on standardizing data and having a standard asset data profile, which applies to both groups, but then standardize the data on the asset holder world side of things and standardize data on the physical asset world. And it will enable both of these things to come to pass.
Thank you.
So, David, I got a question for you. Having gone to a number of realcoms, when I go there, the asset holders world is unquestionably separate from the physical asset world in terms of the attendees and these presenters and exhibitors, et cetera, right?
100%.
Yeah. So what do we need to do to, in your mind, to get those two groups to start working together?
That's why I'm in ULI, the Urban Land Institute, because that's where those asset holders and asset owners live, and the real estate developers as well. And that's also why I lead the data forum for ULI to try to push this stuff forward. And I really see an opportunity to help educate. Like JP Morgan Chase has the biggest real estate fund in the world, and they own hundreds of buildings. Do they have any idea about buildings controls and how to optimize performance? No, typically not. And would they love to? Because it actually helps them with the ESG reporting that their LPs, their limited partners who are contributing the funds to their overall fund, their investors, in essence, need this ESG success, need these ESG success stories. So this is where I see a convergence of incentives coming in the future. Did that answer your question, Steve? Because it's going to take us going to that world, I think.
Yeah, I just, whether it's Realcomm or CRE Tech, there's two groups there that I've had some participation in that try to, Realcomm puts everybody under the same roof, but it's like ships passing in the night.
I would agree. And, just because there are CIOs there doesn't mean they represent the asset managers. Yeah. And I really don't see the asset managers and the asset funds at Realcomm at all. Okay. They do show up at CRETEC, they do show up at Blueprint. And these are where, we start to see this, and it's around PropTech, because a lot of this is PropTech is going to bring all of this together.
Right.
But I see it as a mission for the physical asset side of the world to speak the language of the financial asset management side of the world. And so far, we've not done a good job of doing that. And that's where we can have this convergence happen.
So, conscious of the time, I kind of want to give other people an opportunity to share their thoughts about prediction. Can you bring down your share, David?
Oh, I thought I did.
I was going to just jump in, but if David could actually just bring back his slides for a tick to kind of key in my
Oh, sure.
I think the last slide that you had.
This one?
Yeah, that one there. Okay. So this one, I think, is an interesting one from my perspective. I do think a lot of this is actually driving a lot of the AI machine learning initiatives that are going on at the moment, right? Because of this sort of stuff. And to your point earlier, Anto, there's a lot of movement in AI machine learning. I mean, we filed 2 AI patents just last month on work we're doing internally on some stuff, which is really cool stuff. But it's all centered around this, right? That the folks that we can't get the folks, and we're looking to machines to do kind of plug the holes in a lot of ways, right? And so that's one of our predictions is, as much as there's a lot of hype around AI ML, we do see a lot of substance in it as well. There are absolute pockets of substance. There's a lot of BS around it as well. The challenge for most building owners today is trying to separate out the BS from what is actual, meaningful. What can AI really do for you, type of deal. And there's a lot of opportunity in the sort of data things that we see, the sort of data that we collect, and it's across the spectrum of stuff. It's not just FM, but it's the whole, portfolio stuff. But I thought this slide was quite pointed because that's what's driving it. Getting good folks and people who want to be in the space. So a lot of people are looking at AI machine learning. So that's one of our big predictors. I think AI ML is actually real in this space. We have an active XRS, extended reality solution. That's getting a lot of attention. We've got a lot of clients moving on to XRS. There's some really cool stuff we're doing there with remote management through XRS. And some of the tech that you could do there now is quite phenomenal, but it's driven by this stuff again. And I think the slide before that too, I think you had, Bill.
Yeah, I'm happy to go back.
Yeah, the slide before was about data, right?
Yeah, so this one here.
That relates to the same thing. I was going to bring that up because
yeah, and it kind of relates to the same thing. And I think even the one before that one too, David, if you got one before. So yeah, so
the results of data.
Yeah, I mean, I think what David has here is good base data for a lot of the stuff that we see, is driving technology. And a big one is, again, in our space is AI machine learning, right? How do you not replace? Because one of the interesting things that we've come across, by the way, especially with some of the tech that we're doing when we put it in front of the facility managers, and we, in the early days, we were careful about saying things like, this will let you, replace people or, offload people. And they all laughed at us. And they go, I can't hire the people that I need to displace to begin with. So what you're really telling me is you're letting me reduce the number of open recs that I've got that are out there that I can't fill is the real message. So, don't worry about pussyfooting around the, statement of you could let people go, because I don't have the people to let go in the first place. I need this sort of tech to help fill the gaps that I can't hire for right now.
Right. And the people, a lot of the people are going to go because they're boomers anyway. So
that's right. Right. And you better get all their smarts out of their heads before they leave and stick it into a machine.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else want to chime in?
Sure. I'll take a crack at it for a minute. I think it's been a great discussion, and I basically agree violently with everything that's been presented so far. But I think, fundamentally, a lot of what's going to affect our industry are externalities, things that we don't control at all, like Office Armageddon, etc. And I think that presents a great opportunity. So David mentioned that these asset managers haven't been present. What happens when they cease to exist? Does that industry really self-destructs before our eyes? And the nexus of what we do switches more to institutional real estate away from commercial, as there's that destruction. That dialogue changes there. But fundamentally, capitalism is ruthlessly efficient at repositioning these things. So all I can think of when everyone's talking about a shortage of people is actually Adam Smith's invisible hand is going to synchro mesh that with an absence of work very nicely. And we'll wake up 10 years from now and it will magically have happened. And the destruction of these businesses, the buildings are still going to be there. Just quietly, some people are going to go into bankruptcy and other people are going to be successful. And we're going to be 10 years down the road. But what we have is the opportunity to change the dialogue, because these externalities are going to change some of the fundamentals that drive our industry. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most, is how can we lever those huge changes in society to reposition the industry to move forward. The other thing that when Tracy was talking, the only thing I could think of is that the rate of change has accelerated so much that there's so much noise that it's very hard for us, even inside the industry, to focus on anything. Let's say that that acceleration continues a little longer. Once again, we'll emerge out of the other side of this 10 years from now with capitalism very quickly reconfiguring what's important. And I'm not sure I know exactly what that is, but I know that those external signals are what's going to cause the industry to redevelop. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in with their thoughts?
Sure, let me have a shot here. I mean, lest we forget, you know, we're in the buildings business. That's where it all starts. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's retail or it's office buildings, stadiums, or whatever. And I think that will be the driver. We had a conference exhibition here in London, and people are already talking about some of the headquarter type buildings that have been vacated. They're already now changing to multi-tenanted buildings, and they have 80% let before they've even done the retrofit and refurbishment on them. So it's a kind of a positive note there. And I think the change in functionality of the buildings is going to drive what our industry is going to do. You know, one person said there wasn't many building control stuff actually went in, but there was, you know, a few things added where we were getting data back. And I think that, you know, Bill's question about the people that are coming in and the boomers going, I think a lot of it, you know, the younger guys are going to be coming in on the applications at the cloud level, you know, the tenant billing, the visitor registration, you know, the meeting room spaces, energy, asset management, all those things are things that we're going to attract, and where their applications build on the data. And I mean, that effectively gives an opportunity for someone to have a new area of building management, which is this remote management of buildings as well, with the, you know, these sort of things going on. And I think there will be, you know, this flatter architecture of that doesn't matter where the data sits, whether it sits on-prem, in the middle, in the cloud, you know, it'll be accessible as that is the data out there. So I think the kind of multi-site, multi-tenant type things are going to repurpose and change the buildings is what's going to drive our industry, because I think that's what we're dependent upon. Let's not forget that we're in the buildings business, and that's where it all starts. And I think those changes are what going to actually drive it. And from what I'm seeing, you know, yes, there will be, I think wireless, it will come of age because it helps with quicker retrofit and refurb. You really want to pull all the ceilings down and do all the shell and core with new cabling. Probably not. So I think it will come of age. But I think that's really going to drive the change, is the change in what those buildings are going to be doing. No longer corporate HQs or what the online shopping's doing to retail will actually affect us and what we need to deliver.
Yeah, interesting to hear that people are starting to execute those strategies in the UK.
Yeah,
leading market again, as we talked about last week. The thing that I'm sort of very intrigued about is how the channel is going to change, how the route of market is going to change, and we actually talked about that last week. And you know, we talked about MSIs for ever since we've been doing Monday Live, and clearly what Roger presented was MSIs really got created to solve a problem, a vacant, an area where people are not addressing the problems.
knowledge gap.
Not knowledge gap. Thank you. That's all good. That's all well and good. That goes back to George Samar's comment. Define a role to manage this technology. It's almost like what MSIs are doing is exactly that, thinking about the technology and making sure everything works. And that's all great for large buildings, because MSIs typically are used for more complex buildings. But there needs to be a sort of a MSI light, which I guess is just an SI, less the master part, that's going to start to become that role as well, and not focusing so much on the technology, but focusing more on the outcomes that's necessary for whatever the building is. So it's a lot more, it becomes a lot more of a consultative role than an integration role, because the technology is going to be become a lot easier with time. So it just becomes the skills and the understanding necessary to help a building owner achieve its objective. So I think all of that's going to clarify itself over the next few years. There'll be a sort of a stratification of the SI role, and I'm eager to watch that. And obviously that is fed by all the innovation we were talking about, and by the openness and the interoperability and standards that we keep on talking about. So that's sort of my view of it. Rick, do you have a thought?
Just a few words, context-free words: quantum dots, simplicity, plug and play, and the fun has yet to begin.
No idea what that means without some context.
Yeah, explain.
You ain't seen nothing yet. And a specific thing I would say is that it wouldn't surprise me if over the next couple of years, one of the major names in our industry decided to give away control systems, open control systems, to win the chiller business and to win the air handlers and to win the service contract. They'll give away an open controls platform.
Well,
Right,
that's
trying to
unlike
do that in Europe with data centers. They almost give away the building management system because they got the rest of the stuff there to actually get the rest of the site.
I'm seeing a resurgence in ESCO kind of activity too. Give away and fund hardware and equipment replacement, but I get to keep the savings.
Yeah, and technology driving those business models is the other thing. And that's where I go back. We'll come back to quantum dots at sometimes, but the transistor capacity, we just are touching the front edge of that. So edge computing and AI at a massive scale, you know, that's the part where you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yep. Yep. Doing more with less. Love it.
But guys, my closing comments are Ananto just mentioned a minute ago. Standardization of the data and the communication methods. We do those two things, then the rest of this becomes, whether it's AI or application development, it all becomes possible at scale.
Well, I'd put it the other way around. Without standardization and open, those won't happen. They cannot happen because
they cannot happen. Exactly.
They become really, really complex.
Yeah. So we don't have to overcomplicate this. We just got to get really focused.
The key to that happening is somebody's got to make money doing that.
Right.
Oh,
Right? As soon as somebody really figures that out in a non-risky sort of a way, this will break wide open. That would be my prediction. That's the only thing holding us back right now, I think.
Yep.
Is the business models aren't aware to be put in place to really take advantage of what a truly open, interoperable building looks like and does for you.
Comment I'd like to
Equating it
make
to
is that
shareware.
we're all still working in tribes, and we have our particular technologies that we reach out and feel comfortable with. We have to do a cross-pollination of these tribes because there's significant change within each of the tribes, and that change needs to be examined by the other tribes. And somehow we keep heading to being more close. Our tribes are more close and we're having less communication. So I think we definitely need better methods of trying to communicate the information between the particular tribes and their basic goals.
Yeah,
Okay, we need to bring this to a wrap. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna run too.
Good thoughts, and thank you all. We shall see